to talk about the impacts of COVID-19, both on our daily operations and about some of the problems that have been created by the pandemic. So we have a presentation that we're going to start off with today that is focused on some of the funding sources that are available and some of the new programming and initiatives that are available at the federal level, and also talk about some of the sort of changes in the daily operations of how we manage and administer affordable housing in the state of New Jersey. Forgive me, I've got some notes I'd like to share. Yeah, so one of the topics that not only are we going to talk about the ways in which we do business and the social distancing requirements that have sort of been imposed on some of our typical face-to-face interactions, but we're also going to talk about some of the other challenges that may not be apparent at this point. And that brings me to the topic that we're going to try to weave throughout today's conversation. That's the topic of equity, fairness, and barriers that we may be inadvertently putting up as we pivot to sort of an online or virtual world. We've got some great speakers on that topic that I'm very much looking forward to hearing their comments as we go through the program today. A couple of housekeeping things to talk about. If you are here, if your secondary purpose
and anyone hear me?
Yes. We can hear you. If your purpose for being here, if your secondary purpose for being here today is to collect continuing education credits, there will be a couple of poll questions that'll pop up, I think 4 of them throughout the session today, to just make sure you're participating. That was a requirement of the sanctioning organizations that are offering those credits. So be aware of those, and make sure you participate in those polls to collect your credits. The Q&A box is the spot to throw questions and comments about the session today. And if you have any follow-up questions for our panelists, that's definitely the place to do it. Although a lot of our questions and content today were developed by the submission of questions from you all in the run-up to this event. So you will likely hear, if you did submit one, you'll likely hear your question being brought up to the panel. So that is again, there's the Q&A box is the spot to do that. We've got people keeping a close eye on that. All right, so if you were with us in December, we had a session, I think we called it a crisis within a crisis, and we talked about the looming disaster, the tsunami of evictions that were sort of on our radar at the time. Middle of December, the eviction moratorium was due to expire in just a couple of weeks from that session. There was very little in the way of rental assistance dollars being made available. Those programs that were being funded came with some regulatory burdens that made it pretty difficult to implement those on the ground and to solve the housing crises that that the data was telling us about. But it's, here we are 4 months later, and there's a kind of been a sea change in the tools, the data, and most definitely in the funding that that's available to us. And so our first speaker today is going to talk a little bit about some of the funding that's been made available through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Justin Sheed is he's the director of the New Jersey Field Office for HUD, and he's going to talk about the funding and initiatives that HUD's been tasked with to respond to the housing crisis. Justin will be joined by 2 of his colleagues from HUD, Vanessa Summers and Lena Mitchell, and they're going to lay a little groundwork for us for the remainder of the session about fairness, equity, and other things to keep an eye out as we roll out these initiatives and programs. And with that, I'll turn it over to Justin.
Great, thanks, Mark. Pleasure to be here with you today and to work with you, Ed, and the members. Just many thanks. So once again, I'm Justin Scheid. I came to this role as Field Office Director for HUD's New Jersey office last summer. So I haven't made my rounds in person, but look forward to being out and about in due time. My team and I oversee all HUD functions within the state and lead external affairs with press, electeds, handle customer service, work directly with communities, on navigating the federal government and leads sort of special initiatives on behalf of the department. So I'll talk briefly about some of the overall investments HUD is making to respond to and recover to COVID, and then share other highlights of how we might be able to work together. It's a lot of info in about 5 minutes. I'm not going to dive into FHA or particular financing programs right now, but we can pick up on what resonates and what might be helpful. So you all know, and Mark already said this, but COVID exacerbated our nation's affordability crisis. That's certainly true here in New Jersey. So today, nationally, 1 in 5 renters is behind on rent, and just over 10 million homeowners are behind on their mortgage payments. Last I heard, the rate is 20% forbearance just in New Jersey. So, people of color face even greater hardships and are more likely to have deferred or missed payments, putting them at greater risk of eviction and foreclosure. But the amount of resources coming to the state and communities is unprecedented. And I really hope all of our communities take advantage of everything, think about it strategically, and, never let a good crisis go to waste. So the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which was signed into law in February, that provides emergency rental assistance, more than $21 billion nationally through Treasury, homeowner assistance fund of $10 billion, that's also through Treasury, $5 billion in emergency housing vouchers through HUD, homelessness assistance and supportive services through the Home Investment Partnership Program. $5 billion has been allocated nationally. It's over $130 million to New Jersey. Those allotments were just made this week, or last week. Funding for housing counseling, and also funding for fair housing activities. So Vanessa and Lena will speak more about fair housing in a moment, but this new funding is in addition, and this is where it sort of gets confusing, in addition to the $500 million to New Jersey and relief funding from the CARES Act of last year, and annual formula allocations and relief that came from appropriations in December. So for fiscal year 20 and 21, that means $90 million each year in CDBG, and then $35 million each year in home funding, just in the annual allocations. As New Jersey was also just awarded with $24 million from the HUD Housing Trust Fund to increase and preserve affordable housing in the state. So New Jersey Department of Community Affairs will be administering that funding. So the money is flowing, but I know for all of you and for us in government, for that matter, it's a lot to navigate. Many of you are probably not from the typical, what we know as entitlement communities, the larger cities and towns that receive direct disbursements from HUD, but that doesn't mean that these funding streams are inaccessible. And if you're affordable housing developers and accessing tax credits and all, you're already ahead of the game in trying to figure out how to stack the financing with some of these programs. So the bottom line is my team and I can help you navigate. In many instances, it could be working with local government on accessing small cities CDBG allocations from the state, or collaborating with a county-based consortium on home or CDBG funding. And also important, you all bring leverage within your communities that could make particular projects priorities for towns, the counties, and the state. In terms of relief across agencies, across federal agencies, Treasury is funding the largest portion of rental and homeowner assistance, and that kind of blows HUD out of the water. I don't have the exact figures from it, but from CARES Act alone, $3 billion came from Treasury to the state. And from the rescue plan, another at least $1 billion, and there's an infusion into small businesses and CDFIs as well. The homelessness front is also kind of complicated, but FEMA is funding what they call non-congregate shelter funding. That's when people at most risk of COVID can immediately be housed in hotels, motels, dorms, et cetera. Then HUD Emergency Solutions Grant funds come in, which allow for rapid rehousing and immediate assistance. But the new home funds that have been released will allow a lot of affordable housing preservation focused on those most at risk of homelessness. So that's going to have a long runway. That funding needs to be spent before 2029. So communities will just start thinking about how to get their plans together for that. Also, just a brief mention in terms of other programs, we're still involved in opportunity zones. While not really a program, it's a tax incentive. We're working with communities on ensuring that those are activated by pulling together their plans or thinking about creative uses of those. And then this is all just to say, we're making sense of it all, but the scale and the pace of change is really unprecedented. I can't tell you what to do, but you might want to get creative, ask questions from your local governments, pull together your community with neighboring communities if possible, and make a good case for any of it. So bottom line is, reach out. We have a public email if you want to reach out that way. That's nj_webmanager@hud.gov, and my team is working behind that. Or you're welcome to contact me directly, and we'll find answers to your housing and community development needs. So with that, I know I threw a lot of information at you, but I hope it was useful. Let me know it resonates, and I can turn it over to Vanessa and Lena to talk a little bit about our fair housing work. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vanessa Summers, and I'm here with my colleague, Lena Mitchell, and we work in HUD's Office of Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity. April is Fair Housing Month, and this year we commemorate the 53rd anniversary of the Fair Housing Act of 1968 with the theme, Fair Housing, Not Just Words. And as our Assistant Secretary says, we are open for business. Lena and I will briefly share some key points of the Fair Housing Act and provide a few examples of COVID-19's impact on fair housing rights. Lena?
Thank you, Vanessa. The Fair Housing Act and our mission was to create equal housing opportunities for all persons in America by administering laws that prohibit discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and familiar status. The Fair Housing Act is governed by Title VIII of the Civil Rights Act of 1968, as amended in 1988. It's a federal law that was intended to eradicate discriminatory conduct in the sale and rental of dwellings. There are 7 protected classes that we deal with: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familiar status, handicap, physical and mental, gender identity, and LGBTQ. There are some exemptions. They are for religious organizations, private clubs, owner-occupied dwellings, single-family dwellings, and that are sold by the owner, and housing for older persons. Under the single-family dwelling exemptions, if the house is sold or rented by the owner and a realtor is not used, it's not advertised, or the owner does not own more than 3 houses, then it's exempt. But remember, discriminatory statements are never exempt. Complaints that we don't handle, which we consider non-HUD jurisdictional complaints, are hate crimes and First Amendment. Those are referred to the Department of Justice. Now I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa to talk about COVID.
So how has COVID-19 impacted fair housing rights? Let me share a few examples with you. With respect to discrimination based on disability, there's been an increase in disability-related behaviors of children during remote learning. For instance, you have children who are experiencing increased stress, anxiety, and depression, leading to behavior that landlords often are using to seek to start eviction proceedings. You also have social distancing and other health-related and safety measures that pose unique problems for disabled individuals who rely on others for assistance. In the area of discrimination based on sex and gender identity, there's an increase in sexual harassment and domestic violence incidents, but a decrease in reporting for fear that you will have no place to live. And in the area of discrimination based on race and ethnicity, there's an increased attack on Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And you have instances where owners are refusing to provide maintenance services to inaffordable housing properties, where most tenants are racial ethnic minorities. If you'd like more information on the Fair Housing Act or how to file a complaint, please go to our website, hud.gov. And if you have any specific fair housing questions, we'll respond to them during the Q&A portion of this event. Thank you.
Thanks so much. That was really informative. I think it's always a really good idea to hear again the listed classes that are protected by the Fair Housing Act, because a lot of us, think of it as maybe a little bit more narrow on a day-to-day basis, and it's very good to get that sort of lay that groundwork for the rest of the discussion. So thank you very much. We are going to pivot over to our panel now, and I'm going to ask our presenters to kind of just change their seats a little bit, like slide over into the panel. And Justin, I'm hoping that you'll also join us along with Vanessa and Lena, because I think we've got a couple of questions that you may be able to touch on, or at least have some comments on. I'm hopeful that were submitted to the panelists. And so before we move over, let me give you just a quick rundown on our panelists.
Mark,
Yes,
before you start, can we do the first poll?
thank you so much for the reminder. Yes, that's a great idea. The poll will pop up on your screens. I think it's simple enough that we don't really need to pause for people to contemplate and answer. So we'll just keep moving along. But the poll should be yeah, there, I see it already. Okay, excellent. Yes, so let me pull up my notes here. So our first panelist is Megan York. She's a vice president of CGP&H. She spends a lot of time with the AHP&J as a member of the policy committee, and you might recognize her from previous panels. We've also got another familiar face, Frank Piazza of Piazza and Associates. He's also an administrative agent here in the state of New Jersey, and also one of our frequent, I think one more you get a free hoagie, Frank. And we also have Kathy Pikowski, a senior associate with Triad, who is another administrative agent here in the state. Sharon Clark is executive director of Central Jersey Housing Resource Center, this Resource Center Corporation. She's the only nonprofit administrative agent of our group. So I'm looking forward to her perspective as well. And of course, Vanessa Summers, Lena Mitchell, and Justin Cheadle will be round out the panel for us. So I'd like to start with a question that came in from someone in the run up to the event. They're asking about the availability of programs and funding sources for rental assistance and foreclosure assistance. And Kathy, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to talk about that. And in particular, they were wondering if there were any model programs and what that might look like.
Mark, just to clarify, for using housing trust fund dollars or just in general?
I think in general. I think anything's fair game, really. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as Justin was saying, there is a very large influx of funding that has been coming down. And so this is something a little bit different as administrative agents is you really may want to spend some time becoming available with what is currently available in order to assist both tenants and potential buyers that are looking to buy units, and also to assist tenants and homeowners that are currently in affordable units. So one of the sources of money, as Justin says, came from the Treasury, and that is emergency rental assistance money. Right now, the state of New Jersey Department of Community Affairs is currently accepting applications, and that's strictly for tenants, and it will help pay for, could be close to a year or more to help tenants with any rental assistance they may need. Another source of funding that is currently out is money that also came down from the Treasury and is more emergency rental assistance money that went to each county in the state. So many of these counties are set up emergency rental assistance programs. You'll need to contact, your county directly. It could be through their board, Department of Human Services or social services agencies. And they may be currently accepting applications, or I know some towns are working on getting those programs set up. For example, Middlesex County, I know, will be setting up their program in like the next month. And again, that's very, very similar to the state program, where if there are tenants that are behind in their rent, this program can help pay for, close to a year to help them, stay in their units. There may be exceptions to even go longer. The money has to go directly, the tenant needs to directly apply, but if there's landlords out there that have tenants that need assistance, they really should work together on getting this done. And then in addition to the, as I said, the state New Jersey of community fairs and every county, there are local municipalities that have also received money from the state small cities program that are setting up assistance programs, for helping with rental assistance. And then there is another pot of money that did not come from the Treasury, but that came from HUD. And Justin, again, jump in if I'm, because there's so many different sources, if you need to add anything, but there are what they call entitlement communities that receive large sums of money. And they are using this money to help tenants and also to help homeowners that are behind in their mortgage payments. Just to give you some examples, the Township of Old Bridge, the Township of Edison, Cherry Hill Township, they're all setting up their own individual rental assistance and mortgage assistance programs to help homeowners and tenants that are more considered low income. They have to be, of a certain income range, and they will help them pay with up to 6 months of back rent and back assistance. So really, depending upon what municipality you're working with, so you just have to do a little bit of research and find out where, where some of these applications can be submitted. And then I know, as we're all aware, there's many, private and religious organizations that are also out there helping local tenants with paying their back rent. So that's pretty much on the federal and the state level. And then maybe I'll hold off on the affordability assistance for the next question.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Kathy. I want to talk a little bit about the sort of the county level and how important they are in this, because not only are they, a lot of them, recipients of this Treasury ERA money, right? They're also, in some cases, for the first time, receiving money through the CARES Act via the Department of Community Affairs. So if you're sitting there in this group and you say to yourself, well, our community doesn't get CDBG funds. We've never gotten those in the past. Our county does not have a rental assistance program. Well, the game has changed. There's a whole new paradigm and a whole new stream of funding that is available. And Justin, I was hoping you might have a minute to just talk about, how this is different and how this is sort of unprecedented. These HUD funds that are passing through and made available to in a different way to communities.
And just to put it into perspective, one other major package that came through for New Jersey years ago was Sandy, post Sandy, but all of that funding went through the state. None of it actually went to municipalities. This is completely different. So the way that the Treasury funds flow, essentially directly, any county above 500,000 and then cities above 200,000 receive those allocations directly. But then all the HUD entitlement jurisdictions, which are as small as Princeton, Piscataway on up, also receive their direct allocations. And then the state's just putting together, I think the state will figure out how to do their small cities program in due order. But there's going to be a lot of funding to do that for CDBG to local communities. So yeah, Mark, you're right. I mean, the other thing I think to add just is that, a lot of folks don't have duplication of benefits experience with these types of things, and that shouldn't scare you, because it really should be as simple as, like, when you're providing rental assistance or other types of programs, just make sure that you're staggering it so that maybe the state comes in at first with those Treasury funds to deal with particular assistance. Then a local community might want to stand up after that, in terms of time horizon with CDBG funds or similar. So there's all sorts of ways to get creative, but the bottom line is, talk to us, talk to your communities, try to get the electeds involved if possible, just so that they're aware as well and can sort of clear the runway for any of these projects as they come along.
Yeah, I've also been noticing that it seems like the responsibility for these programs are living in different ways at each at the county levels. I mean, I've seen counties issue RFPs and basically farm out the entire implementation of a rental assistance or any variety of COVID assistance programs. We've seen departments of community development, which are generally the ones that are responsible for HUD entitlement funds. We've seen them run them right out of their office. We've seen situations where boards of social services are set up. So if you're calling your county and you're not getting the answers, that you're not connecting to these programs that we're talking about today, keep asking questions, keep calling around. You will find it. These are, in a lot of cases, these are programs that are being built up from scratch. Like no one's really has an infrastructure set up to accommodate 5,000 requests for rental assistance. The county program that you might have that's set up for that might help 50 people a month or something like that. This is a whole different scale of funding and infrastructure that's needed to run programs like this. So yeah, so keep calling around and reach out to different agencies.
The only quick
Always
thing
start with the the New Jersey State website. They're pretty good on listing things that are available. And then I know all the counties also, their websites have been very good on listing available programs. And then even down to the local municipal websites have been very good on listing if they're currently accepting applications, for rental or mortgage assistance.
And Mark, the only thing to add on to what you just said is that this is new for the Department of Treasury too, like massive billions or trillions of dollars coming through. So we're all trying to figure it out in real time.
Yeah, those of us that have been watching the Treasury regulations are very aware that it's new to Treasury. But it's I'm quite pleased with what's been rolled out so far, and the sort of how much easier that program seems to be ready to navigate the process than, for instance, the rigidity of like the CDBG program. But let's move on. We've got a lot of other questions to talk about. Megan, did you want to jump in?
I have something to add. I believe it just rolled out this week, a website called Housing Help. The web address is housinghelpnj.org. It's funded through the New Jersey Pandemic Relief Fund and the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, and it's administered by the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey. The web address again is housinghelpnj.org, and it just started, so I think it's too early to know how effective, but this is supposed to be a master clearinghouse of all these various programs in the state. So I'm really excited about this because I know personally I've had a hard time keeping track of what programs exist and when they close and when to get on. So this is a master clearinghouse of all information for renters, landlords, homeowners, resource library, FAQ. And that I have high hopes, because the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey is doing this, and they're always on the ball and do great stuff. So I think that's going to be a really important tool, as for everyone to refer people in need there, and also keep track of what's going on statewide.
Maybe what was the name of that site again?
It's called Housing Help NJ. The web address is housinghelpnj.org. I can even, I think I can share my screen. You can get a visual here. This is the website here. And like I said, it's got information for, what's out there, and you can submit requests for help. And so I think this is going to be a really good resource.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. We'll obviously include a link in the follow-up to the session today. Oh, and somebody posted it in chat, but I don't think everybody can see chat. So yeah, we'll distribute that. And Megan, while we have you, one of the first questions the next questions is I want to talk about. We have a lot of questions about eligibility and the sort of the challenges of determining eligibility in an era when people do not have, let's say, tax returns that necessarily reflect their current situation, or even pay stubs over a certain period of time that reflect their current situation of employment. And so the very first question was, how do you project income during a pandemic? Should we relax minimum income requirements, i.e. unemployment extensions, temporary layoffs, and how to calculate stimulus payments? Megan, you want to try to tackle that one, and we'll.
Yeah, I will say I'll get the conversation started, and I know that this is something that we want everyone on the panel to weigh in on this issue. And I have to say, just to set the broader perspective, that this time is unprecedented. The pandemic and how to calculate income. This is different than the 2008 economic downturns. It's different than Sandy. This is just threw everything out the window. Just so many different ways. And it was, especially early on, it was quickly evolving. What was going to happen with unemployment, and even that, you get an extension, and then that extension expires, and then there's another extension. So trying to keep track of that. As we try to adapt to this, I kept trying to keep two guiding principles in my mind, and I share this now, even though we're further along, but we don't know what's going to happen with unemployment still. So we're still in the same situation. Is how can we help people with income certifications? And when we see that our standard process is creating barriers, we need to evaluate what's the situation with the pandemic right now, and is there anything we can do to remove those barriers? But at the same time, we have to be extremely serious about the income certifications and cannot relax our standards. So it's a combination of adapting to these really difficult times, but while protecting this extremely precious resource of affordable housing in New Jersey. And that's the challenge that we're working for. And then all while our staff's working remotely, we don't have access to the files that we normally would have, and even just communicating with each other and knowing it's really been a challenge. I think unemployment, I mentioned that first, is been a difficult one to keep a handle on for projecting income. Where our office is projecting the unemployment on it for 12 months right now. It's not extended automatically for 12 months, but until we hear otherwise, that's what we're going with. This has been a real challenge because of the small extensions. And then on top of that, we've seen problems with New Jersey's unemployment system. I don't know if other people on this panel has experienced this, but in January, for example, the state had a major glitch that was showing everyone's unemployment was ending. And that was not jiving with what you were reading and what I was reading in the news, that this was not happening. So we had to be open to the fact that the unemployment paperwork was wrong. And then sure enough, the next day in the Star Ledger was a headline that the entire, hundreds of or thousands of people were affected by this glitch in their unemployment paperwork. No one was getting cut off. It was just that they couldn't process these minor extensions. So we are operating with a 12-month projection, and also when we see something that doesn't make sense, trying to be a little bit more critical about think critically about what's going on with current events in the pandemic, and trying to match that to the state's record keeping. As far as minimum income goes, if an applicant will be paying more than 35% of their income towards rent, for example, with their unemployment, we do ask them, we do take a look at what their income was before the pandemic. We talk to them about whether this layoff is temporary. If the employer can provide a letter stating that they are going to rehire them, we will consider that. We'll look at the last 4 pay stubs before the pandemic in that case. We'll say as we move further along in this, situation, we're not getting a whole lot of employers who feel like they can, say that they're going to rehire people at this point. But early on, that was something that was more common. Does anyone else want to weigh in on, unemployment and how you're handling minimum income? Yeah.
Is that for me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were looking at. Yeah, I agree with everything that Megan just said. Basically, we've always counted unemployment as a 12-month benefit, even if it wasn't, because our standard is that we count what someone's income is the day that the final application is submitted. And then we calculate that or prorate that over a 12-month period. And we do that now. The only difference that we've made with regard to the unemployment part is that I don't know that we're counting some of the increased benefit. I know the first increase in benefit, which when folks were receiving $600 a week in extra unemployment benefit, we weren't allowing that to put people over income, but we were counting that for minimum income because it was really difficult to know how long anybody would be receiving that particular benefit. And we're going to have to take a look now, I think, and reevaluate that again as new benefits come along. We don't want to penalize anyone for receiving the benefits, though, basically. And our principles, like Megan, are the same. We're trying to help people out and get them into affordable housing. The problem with counting unemployment only, if they're going to receive 2 months of it or 6 months of it, is that really does exclude a lot of people from an affordable home on the basis of minimum income. So we try to take care of that. One-time stimulus checks, et cetera, that people receive, also we're not counting that as income. That's one-time benefit, sporadic benefits, if you will. Anybody else?
I just wanted to add that, even though it's calculated, it's the unemployment, a lot of mortgage companies will not, accept that for getting a mortgage. So, I mean, they just have to wait for that. And I don't know if anybody has had any difficulties with landlords accepting the unemployment income in order to, when they run their credit checks and for, signing a lease. Has anybody run into problems with that, or?
Kathy, the only thing that I wanted to add to that is that I don't know that it's in the federal statute, but the state requirement that all income be considered when assessing somebody's eligibility for a rental home, I think comes into play to some degree, where that's one of the major factors that have pushed us to accept most of that income, especially for minimum income standards, because we don't want to discriminate against someone on the basis of the source of their income, which is part of the state law against discrimination.
I completely agree. I just think it's really good for all our administrative agents out there to be aware of that if there's any landlord that's giving pushback.
Yeah, on a related topic, we had a question concerning an application where the applicant included a letter that they would be returning to work at a certain date, and whether or not that promise of a job and promise of an income could be folded into the analysis.
Mark, I'm going to put up the next poll while folks answer this question.
Yeah, we would definitely include a letter if the applicant was able to provide a letter from their employer saying that they would be rehiring them. We would utilize that, and we would request the pay stubs from before the pandemic to evaluate the income. So that is something that we would accept. And this would fall in the category of, unprecedented, of the way we would approach things, because we've never had to work through a pandemic before. So looks like maybe Frank has a comment there too.
No, I have nothing. I have nothing on that. Nothing more to add.
We had a question too about how unemployment income is calculated, but I think we covered that pretty well. The the idea is that you would project out for 12 months despite what the, what kind of commitment the applicant had from the government for assistance. We had another series of questions about the processes. So I wanted to kind of pivot over to that topic for a minute. And I think this is where we're going to have a little bit more of a robust conversation about barriers and obstacles and fairness. So the first question is about something as simple as like signatures on via the virtual world, whether or not with the notary, if there's a notary in your process, how are you, working around that? If with the signatures, how are you doing that? What's an acceptable means to get a signature for you folks? And I guess we maybe ask, well, Sharon got up, so we'll come back to her. Oh, she is on mute still. Oh, she can't talk. Okay. All right. So maybe Frank, if you wouldn't mind jumping on that. Are there any like tools that you're using to get documents signed and executed?
Currently, we are not. We are accepting, like for a preliminary application, we've waived the requirement that there be an actual human signature on it in order to process preliminary applications. But aside from that, we have not waived or made any other accommodation in that regard. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say we've waived notary requirements, particularly early on when it was just not safe. So we did waive documents that we would have previously required notaries for. We have stopped. Sort of related, I saw there's a comment in the chat about working from home and financial information, just in terms of accommodations. This is something that is very important for an administrative agent to protect applicants' privacy and financial. We have lots of financial documents. We do everything through secure networks on the computer, and it do not allow any applicant files at home whatsoever. So there's no, you log in to the office server like you're in the office, and you log out, and there's no file laying around on a home desk or anything like that.
That's not something that's, that's difficult to implement even on a small scale, right? You're basically working from a cloud, and whether it like lives at a office in your office as a hard drive, or if it lives with Google, it's, keeping a wall between storing the files locally at your house and in a secure place is not that difficult.
I agree with you. I think that the hardest thing was getting used to not having that folder. It had, like, for the income certification, the printout of everything and having the person's stuff, and that's just, and then yeah, got it. And that was the standard business. And so now that's everything is done on screens, and we don't have, if you're working from home, that file that you can refer to.
Kathy, do you have anything to add on the topic of accommodating digital signatures? And as a sub question, have you noticed any particular populations or groups of people that this might be a barrier for?
Well, I do know that they were making some exceptions for recording documents, that they were allowing electronic signatures through PDF, which is something that we've been trying to use more, is Adobe and electronic signatures on PDF. However, as you said, that's definitely a barrier for many people. Many people just do not have the access or the knowledge of how to use that. So its use is limited, but the more that it can be expanded, the easier that it will make processing, especially the documents that need to be recorded, easier. But a lot of times we're just going back to old-fashioned mailing documents. We're getting more, stuff through the mailing and using fax. And a lot of people are just taking screenshots of documents with their phones and sending them over. And we're just being very flexible on how this, documents are received in order to, get people approved and into units.
Vanessa and Lena, I'm curious to know, I know it's very early days for all of this, and there's not a lot of data yet to look back on as to, about barriers and people that we might be inadvertently disenfranchising from, this process. Do you, I'm certain this is something you've been thinking about and watching as all of this information, all these processes just get moved into a different direction. Are there best practices and concerns or any thoughts that you could share with us about where you see this at the sort of from your perspective?
So I would say that some of the best practices is consistency. That what you do for one tenant, you do for all tenants. The other thing is to be mindful of your limited English proficient population. It's getting better, but I can't tell you how many times I'll call a place and it's press 1 for English, press 2 for Spanish. That the press 2 for Spanish should be in Spanish, because the individuals may not be able to understand that amount of English. So that's something else that you need to take into consideration as you modify your policies. Remember to have them translated or have the ability for individuals to access translated services. And the other thing, I know what we are seeing is that the elderly and disabled population, they're having difficulties with the electronic platforms. So that's something else to be mindful of when you put in these quick fix-its. Good practices, reach out to the individuals, see what works for them, because they may have an idea or they may be working with a support services agency who's already figured it out for you. So that's just some quick tips that folks can use.
Yes, and just to piggyback off what Vanessa said, we've been doing a lot of that modification, like she said, being consistent with regards to how you are dealing with everybody across the board. In my position as an investigator, we've done a lot of information gathering, and it's done differently than how we used to do it. So just as one of the other panelists said, we have started to do a lot of mailing, because a lot of the clientele that we are dealing with, they just do not have access to computers the way the world would think that they would have access. And in our agency, we've gone above and beyond, and I think Vanessa can attest to this, where we're making calls on their behalf. I know I've certainly done that. We've done everything that we can to get electronic signatures. When they're not having electronic signatures, we do it verbally until we're able to get it out to them via certified mail. So just everything to try to help along that population to help them as much as possible.
Oh, it's really interesting. I'm sure you have it as an investigator. I'm sure you could write a book on interesting stories about fair housing issues, and that's fascinating. I'm curious to know if anyone has built in a process into their interactions with people that allow them to name a proxy on their behalf. So I was sitting in on a demonstration of an ERA, emergency rental assistance program, and the software company had built in a little place where you could click off and say, this, I need someone else to help me with this, and here's the email address of that person. Is anybody given any thought to that, or come up with a way or added some provisions to allow people to work with a proxy or someone else to help them?
I think the simple answer that we've always had is that if somebody provides us written permission, we'll speak to whomever on their behalf, or find someone to speak in another language for them or with them or with their proxy. We've done that many times. So it's with written permission. Anybody can, work with us for them. We have a lot of social workers who actually contact us on behalf of clients.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Mark, I have a little bit of a tangent, but related to fair housing, if I can jump in.
Sure.
We had a concern and still have a concern about people who are reluctant to go look at affordable housing opportunities because they're the early on, or just they didn't want to be in a house or an apartment with many other people. And if that was the only venue for the viewing or the only access that was being able to provide it, and because of their that they were unable to attend. So we have made it a point to educate landlords and sellers that they what the state's laws were or rules were regarding the number of people who are allowed inside, and now and also that they need to make individual appointments with people if the affordable applicant is not comfortable with how they were showing the affordable housing opportunity previously, to make sure that there's access during this time.
Interesting. So we're going to pivot slightly and talk about one of the more, we'll call it intensive interaction with affordable housing, and that covers the topic of rehabilitation. Some of you may know that one of the ways in which a community can accrue affordable housing credits is through the rehabilitation of owner-occupied housing. People that live and work in your community, own homes in your community, happen to be low or moderate income according to the regulations, and have a need to have their something upgraded in their home, a major system that needs to be replaced. Obviously, that requires a lot of visits, both from the program team, from contractors, from inspectors, and there's, it's certainly, I would argue that this is probably the biggest area that's challenged by social distancing. I want to start with Kathy, and as one of the companies that does a lot of housing rehabilitation in the state, get her perspective on some of this.
Okay, I guess if everybody remembers, it seems like so long ago, but last spring, when all construction activity was shut down and had to stop, except for some various exceptions that the governor had allowed. But I think it was probably like last May or June, when they started allowing construction again, the governor put out some executive orders in order for contractors to follow, to allow construction. A lot of it really came down to some of the same kind of basic information about staggering the workforce that goes into the house, basic, health and safety precautions. So the one thing that we've done with our housing rehab program is we'll schedule a pre-meeting with our inspector and the homeowner and the contractor to discuss all COVID-related, safety requirements before work gets started. So that would include, and this was also built into the cost of the work is, having a separate porta-johns on site, where the contractors would not be going into the house and using any of the homeowners facilities, and then just reviewing what the homeowners expectations are, who's going to be on site when, limiting the number of workers that are in each day, so that the work can get completed. And it has worked. The housing rehab has been able to get back on track and has been moving along. So hopefully this whole issue will be resolved in the next couple of months. But until then, we're just continuing with these safety protocols.
Very interesting. So there's, a lot of people always think about housing instability as like, a financial matter, but housing instability can also affect, the condition could be driven by the condition of your house. So if a heating system fails in the middle of the winter, that is a threat to your housing stability. So it's super important that these rehab programs figure out a way to pivot and address the needs of the community. Especially when there's cold weather and things like that are sort of more of a direct threat to people's ability to stay in their home. I'm curious, Kathy, are you seeing? I'm curious about the cost of this. Are you seeing differences in cost to the rehab contractors? I mean, obviously paying for a porta-john, I would assume that's an impact in cost, but are these sort of scaled back approaches to doing the work with less employees? Are you seeing that as impactful on the cost of the rehabilitation, or is it too soon to tell?
Not in these projects, because these projects, have typically been, single family owner occupied, and the work is usually done by smaller contracting firms, often firms only with 1 or 2 employees. So that hasn't really had too much of an effect. The cost of the materials is causing some of the bids, to go up, but there hasn't been any real direct effect in getting the projects done for this type of work.
Excellent, thank you. I think we have Sharon back. Sharon, are you? Can you get a head nod if you're working? If you're great, awesome. So we're gonna have you catch us up real quick on a bunch of different topics. Let's start with the. Do you have any comments on that unemployment question that we talked about earlier about the sort of weird situation we're in with documentation on unemployment?
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm so sorry, everybody. Everything worked fine yesterday, so I apologize. Basically, with unemployment, we do a full application up front. We don't do a pre-app. So if something doesn't mesh with the applicant, we also check with them and just make sure that how we calculated, if they have any discrepancy, that we can try and see if we can work it out, because we want to make sure we're always fair, and we do that with each person. Also, we verify, obviously they get a statement from unemployment when they reconfirm. So we just want to make sure that if we are going to put them into the rental, that there won't be a problem a couple months in where they're going to struggle with rent payments, or, because their unemployment ran out, if that's going to be the only source of income. And we really have been pretty successful without any major issues during the COVID with the unemployment. So we just make sure we match documentation.
Sharon, did you have any comments on the topic of that, on that scenario where the applicant had a promise of employment in the future?
So how we've always operated is that it's a picture in time. So whatever documentation that they can show us about employment, like same way we would treat a letter of hire, if they're going to start in 3 weeks and they've got the letter of hire and they're not signing the lease until after that, we might certify them contingent upon that actually happening. But we would go ahead and put them in the lottery and the category and everything.
Excellent. And the last one I wanted you to catch us up on, do you have any technology that you're deploying for signatures, or has there been any change in the way that you're processing applications?
So we were deemed essential. 62% of our clients are very low or low. So we've never stopped working as far as coming to the office and staggered shifts and things like that. But we did implement DocuSign so that if people have the ability, they can. And we checked with HUD. We're a HUD agency. So we had to check with HUD and Department of Human Services and all our other entities to make sure that that wasn't a problem, because we also have a disclosure form that each client has to execute. So we had to make sure that that was okay. So they've all given their approval for a DocuSign.
Is it too soon to tell yet how DocuSign is being accepted and where it's creating gaps in technology, needs?
So the only gap is somebody like me who's kind of older. I don't love all this technology. I am getting used to it. I can tell you, though, it's very frustrating. So a lot of my older adults are people that don't have access to computers, things like that. So they've really been very happy. Our suite door is a glass front door. It only has a little bit of wood paneling around it. So we can slip things under the door to people so that they can execute documents if they prefer to come to our location. We're in a elevator building and things like that. So we've come up with different things for people to help them so that there's no hiccup with documents.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're figuring out ways around these things. That's kind of par for the course these days, right?
Yeah. Even with the documents, the US mail's been an issue. So some people, and I don't blame them, there's a lot of confidential information. So they feel better actually making sure they tap on the door and they slip it under, and then we look at it and kind of tell them, oh, you missed this, and we slip it back, and those kinds of things.
Sharon, based on your previous comments, is it fair to say that you are a paper-oriented crew over there as applications come in paper?
So here's the thing, we have to treat everybody the same to be fair. And we're a nonprofit. So some people's tax return, like we collect 3 years tax returns and things. So if we were printing all of that, that's like multiple people's full-time jobs. So in order to be fair to everyone, they have to somehow get us the documentation for the files and everything that we have to, follow all the regulations. So in order to do that, we give them many, many options of how they can either come here. We have a drop box, we have after hours, they can get it slipped under. We will work with them for our older adults. We even have advocates through Office on Aging that'll help them pull the paperwork from their houses if they have, a hard time getting the checklist done.
So there's a question in chat that sort of relates to this that maybe we'll run around the panel real quick. Is anyone, and I'll just ask it in a different way, is anyone working 100% digital with documents, or that they must be submitted digital, they're only being processed digital? Is there anybody that's in that category? No. Okay. So Megan, you want to jump in?
We're not a must, but we do not require anything original. So if you want to send us originals, we'll accept that too. We don't say go away. We come back with a scan, but we will accept all electronic.
And it's fair to say that the workflow from your side is all digital. Like you're only looking at things on your screen. You're not printing out someone's digital application, processing it, and then shredding it or anything like that.
Correct. Yeah.
Frank, you have any comments on this topic?
Yeah, a couple things. One is we have a hard time keeping people away from the paper. They want to go back to that. So we are 50% back in the office. We have cohorts. So every other day there's a different cohort that goes into the office. So our office is about 50% occupied. We have, all of the cleaning and all of the protocols in place. Our office is still not open to the public, and we don't see that happening for a little bit yet. So, but when people are home, we do the same thing. We ended up not only having to purchase a whole bunch of more computers and laptops, but also a whole bunch of more second screens for the laptops so that folks can easily manage, looking at documents and at the same time processing their application, which takes a whole, when somebody's been doing it for a long time, it does take a little bit of a retraining or a getting used to. I would want to say about DocuSign, and maybe I was just burnt, almost burnt some time ago. If you use DocuSign, if you require DocuSign, it's a good practice to let somebody know in a regular email in advance, because DocuSign has been used, or the image of DocuSign has been used, I should say, in phishing scams before. So you want to be careful not to just open a DocuSign document without knowing who it's coming from and that it's a legitimate DocuSign document. Because your system will let the DocuSign in, and it's it's a document that you can click on, that you can activate, and it might get around some of your other security protocols as a result of that.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been wrestling with the idea of trying to integrate DocuSign, and I think one of the very first things that I did that really helped me understand it was I sent a document to myself to sign, right, just to see what that flow looks like. What does it look like on the receiver's end? And yeah, so I think that sending an email to somebody who says, this is what this email is going to look like, you're going to get an email from me in a few minutes,
Exactly.
Keep an eye out for it. I think that's all super important, because just this morning I got a phishing scam from somebody that Kathy knows about that was it was certainly an intent to impersonate someone, and you got to be really on your toes these days. So I feel like we're setting people up to be a little less a little less cautious about things that are coming to them, because I got pending applications in for rental assistance. Now all of a sudden there's this email that says something about rental assistance. I'm just going to keep clicking through, and no matter what. So it's really important that you educate people. That's a fantastic comment, Frank. Anybody else? Kathy, do you have any comments on this topic at all?
No, just similar to Frank. Our office is kind of half open. A lot of what we've been doing is if mail does come in, or it's usually scanned and then sent out to the case manager, and the file is reviewed all kind of online. But as I said, a lot of people still just prefer to mail stuff in, and that's not a problem. A lot of times too is we'll work with the local municipalities, like if there's a homeowner or an applicant who can't get to Staples, we'll send them over to the municipal building and they can scan documents and send them over to us too. So again, it's just trying to be as flexible as we can.
Thank you.
Mark, excuse me, I just wanted to add, one of the things that we did is like, this is one of those little practical things. If you have multiple folks, when Kathy mentioned the faxes, we assigned our folks who are working out of their homes their own fax number that goes as an email to them directly. That saves us a lot of processing of faxes to go somewhere else. So when a compliance specialist asks for something and the applicant wants to fax it, they can fax it, but it'll go directly to that specific person instead of to the office fax. It's just those small technological, modifications have helped a lot.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought of that before. So person's working remotely, if something were to be faxed to the office, it's a challenge to retrieve that, especially if it's spitting out on paper. But if it's being stored in a, one of these fancy copiers, that's even a challenge, because you've got to, when it lands in the directory, it's just a series of numbers with a date stamp or something like that on it. So that's a really interesting workaround. I like that one. I'm going to take that one. Thank you.
For people with iPhones too, there's a lot of things you can do on your phone with scanning. And so they're just taking a picture, for example, in the iPhones in the notes section, you can scan documents one page at a time. It comes out as a high quality PDF. So we teach people how to use some of the tools with their phones to take scans. The pictures are pretty tough for the people reviewing the application to have all these JPEGs of things, but this PDF scans with the iPhones work pretty nicely.
Us Android people have that ability to me.
Okay.
Excellent. So Frank, there was a follow-up question about your paper submissions and storage. This is probably not necessarily COVID specific, but the question was, what kind of security measures do you have in place for your paper storage of documents?
Well, we have security measures. I'd rather not discuss them with everyone, but we do have appropriate security measures with documents, both physical and otherwise.
Sharon, I'm sure you've got a regiment too of security protocols in place for your paperwork.
Yeah, so everything is under lock and key. We get, as I said, we're a HUD agency, so we have to make sure we turn in how we are keeping our files, and why we've been open the whole time during the pandemic. We have not been open to let people into the suite. Even if we have, which we do, deep cleaning regularly, somebody has to be here all the time with those folks, so that and everything is kept locked in cabinets, and nothing can be out in sight or where somebody could see anything. And then we make sure that we following all the records, retention and things like that. We drop the things back off to the different municipalities and townships as appropriate. And then they're responsible, they sign off and they're responsible for keeping everything safe.
Interesting. And I think this would be a good time to plug the records retention class that AHPNJ and Rutgers have developed. Not only does it talk about storage, but about just the retention requirements or the affordability period and all things related to that. All right. So there were some questions that were posed during our session today that I want to touch on. There was a question about if we've got any sort of sense of the future of the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums. I I think the latest is, and if there's anybody's more comfortable on this topic, please chime in, that the federal eviction moratorium takes us through the end of June, and the state of New Jersey has issued a 60-day add-on to the lifting of the state of emergency here. So the New Jersey state one is probably going to be more restrictive because we're getting pretty close to 60 days from June. But that's the latest that I know about. Does anybody have any aware of any additional information on that topic?
Mark, I can just make a quick mention that from the latest executive order on the CDC one, there's a little bit more guidance out there. So if you do have questions on that, take a look at it, because it's a little bit different than when it was first instituted last year. But the state of New Jersey's has been much more stringent since the beginning. So it kind of supersedes the CDC one. But that's not the case in all states. That just happens to be the case here in New Jersey.
There's also a question about from Renee about the advertising that's being done for all these various programs that are out there, and there's not an easy solution to it. And that the website that Megan mentioned before, if it achieves its mission and can be that one-stop shopping place for assistance, that might be the best resource that I know of available right now, because the sad reality is that all of these programs are being scaled up from scratch, advertising is being developed by these programs. There's no national model or there's no sort of turnkey marketing package that comes with your ERA funding. Luckily, there is money that's available in all of these different funding sources for administration and other sort of non-rental assistance and mortgage assistance needs. So a community could develop a robust program. I know in Gloucester County, they're working on a little sleeve that goes over your newspaper that's going to advertise the availability of the rental assistance program. And they just did one earlier this month for their business assistance program. But this is, again, there's no template to work from. This is really up to these communities to identify identify a marketing package that's going to work for them. And which brings me to wanting to fold in Lena and Vanessa on this topic. This is, we've got agencies that are wrestling with developing these programs for the very first time, having to set up phone banks and computer networks and hire people and do all those things. And then the marketing is also is their responsibility too. And these may not be like people and departments that are typically have fair housing and fairness in their high up on their list of things that they're trying to achieve. Do you have any thoughts or any comments about where you've seen this working, where it hasn't been working, and any best practices that you could share?
So I know everyone has had to make adjustments during this time, and my words of wisdom to folks who are doing this for the first time is to reach out, check our website, check the state's website. And then you also have fair housing groups that are working in your state that receive funding from HUD. Check with them also to make sure that you are compliant. One of the things that I've seen is the impact on the fair housing groups, because they're not in the office and they're letting folks know that, don't give up, leave a message, call, write, and we will definitely get back to you. So, everyone's dealing with the situation right now the best way that they can. But at the same time, like I said in our presentation, we are open for business. And if anyone feels that they are not being treated fairly, they shouldn't predetermine whether or not we can assist them. They should reach out to us, and then we can determine whether or not we can assist them with whatever's going on.
Interesting. Thank you. Lena, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Vanessa said it very eloquently in terms of what we're looking at, and I agree with her. Everything that she said is true. So just what we see, we try to work across the board. Like she said, if someone does believe been discriminated against, or they just have a question, just to reach out. We are open. We have individuals who sometimes they will call, even if they don't have a case with our office, just to find out, hey, am I in compliance? What would you do? And they'll give us, little scenarios, and we do try to help them as much as possible before they do get themselves in the situation.
Thank you. I'm going to throw out a topic that I did not share in advance with anyone, and I'm really curious to hear what any comments that anybody might have. So let's back up to the scenario where you're answering the phone and you're responsible for picking up that phone when someone calls in looking for an inquiry with an inquiry about affordable housing, whether it's a rehab program, ownership unit, or a rental unit. You're picking up that phone, and the call doesn't. Generally, these calls, there's a high percentage of these calls that kind of veer off topic, right? People start talking about situations that they're in, things that might have driven their need for a unit, and other things that are going on in their lives. And the reason I bring this up is I was on a call a couple of weeks ago with a group out of South Carolina that had set up an ERA, an emergency rental assistance program, and they had built in this trauma-informed care model into their program. And that was a topic that was new to me. So I Googled it, watched a little TED Talk. I encourage anybody that finds this interesting to go back and look at that. But basically the concept is this digital shift creating or taking away an opportunity for someone to share with you a situation that you may be able to help them with by a referral? So for instance, the person, you may get an application it's a mom and a kid looking for a rental unit. But if that digital application may not tell the story that she would have told you over the phone, where she informed you that she was fleeing from domestic violence, and so I'm curious to know, is anybody built in a check and a balance or an opportunity for people to kind of freestyle other needs that they might have beyond the particular program that's in front of them?
I just want to call attention to people needing to complete the polls if you want continuing education credits. There's one up right now.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Well, Mark, I can just kind of say from, working for so many years in housing related projects that often, the house is the least of the applicant's problems and issues. So usually what we'll do is we'll just kind of keep a list of available, social services available so you can always kind of refer people, to something that they may need. I mean, there's a lot of good resources for that, especially if you get down to like the county level. Also, keeping a list of other places that they can apply for affordable housing. We'll have lists with, Piazza on it, with community grants and planning, with a lot of the tax credit units, so that if you can just send that to the applicant and they can kind of like sort through it and help apply for it. But it's something that I don't know, I've personally just seen for many years. So just kind of comes with the territory. We're really just not there only to help with their housing application.
Mark, if you were directing, I agree with Kathy. Also, I think when you were asking the question, were you asking it, is this now there's sort of less of an opportunity to speak to somebody?
Yeah.
But our phone system goes to all of, we have people still responding by phone. We probably have way more phone calls now than we did before. And emails is another way that people express themselves. We do, I don't know, 200 or 300 emails regularly a day, just basically people wanting to know information or wanting to find out about something. So I almost think that I think generally folks have accommodated the shift in a bit. We used to have, people come into the office, and that is different, that we don't have that now. But I'm pretty sure that most of them who would have come have found another way to communicate with us as best as possible.
I agree with Kathy. For us, we're a little bit unique, as I said, because we're a HUD agency. So we've always collaborated with about 40 other nonprofits in our area and the Board of Social Services and Human Services and all the different resources, so that whatever, as we're talking to the client, we do a full intake, and then we find out. So if their issue is credit or financial literacy, or they have some other barriers that are a hindrance, we try and see what we can do and provide them at no cost, so that we can get over those hurdles and they can achieve their goals, which is what I think most of the people on the call, we want people to be successful in housing. That's one of the great things, is most of the people are not trying to not get people in housing. We're trying to get the people in housing. In my whole career, the worst thing to me is for a developer to build affordable housing and then have any units not be leased or occupied in a sale or resale. So I agree with the other comments from the speakers, that I think people try and keep resource lists and have connections for people and to help them get to their objectives.
Yeah. And that's the same with our agency as well with HUD. If I could just chime in for a minute, we have the same system that's set up. Even though we have an 800 number that's for FHEO specifically, we do have individuals that call, and their call may not be related to FHEO. However, we have individuals that they point them in the right direction to our other agencies, whether it's multifamily, CPD, or PIH, to get them to the right entity to help them get the housing assistance that they need.
I have one final thing to chime in, and I am going to look up the trauma-informed care after this webinar, so thank you, Mark. But I want to be, on the flip side, a lot of people do like these enhanced online resources. So I think we can't give up on the personal touch, but I think a lot of people are trying to address things at 11 p.m. at night and want to go to a website and get the resources and take, do things, and that does work. So I think there is a flip side with improving online resources to a certain population, really does enhance access. So I don't want to lose sight of that too.
Excellent.
I just want to add one more thing too, is that one of the things that we've done that we probably would not have been able to do is we've begun online seminars. Our current one is regarding how to build your credit and how to read a credit report. So we've partnered with a bank to provide the content for the webinar, and we've been repeating it, and it's live, and so many people, I think we've had literally hundreds of people attend the webinar. That's something that we probably would not have been able to do, pre-COVID. So in one sense, everybody's sort of getting used to different ways of doing things that really allow for more participation in some respects.
Fascinating.
If I can just add also that on our website, we have resources with housing counseling agencies, because the area that folks are going to be impacted in is with their credits, with their credit scores being eligible in terms of their income. And I would just suggest that you direct folks to housing counseling agencies to have them better understanding where the gap is between what the owner is looking for to qualify them based on and what they have. And the housing counseling agency can help them with that.
Excellent. Thank you. So we are coming really close to the end of our session. I wanted to make a couple of comments about, well, I'm going to mute you, Ed. You're getting some echo, but I'll turn you back on in a second. I just wanted to make a couple of quick closing remarks and thank all the people that put this session together. The AHP Education Program Committee, Gail Feister, Steve Weinberg, Toy Collins, and Michael Asani in particular for being the driving force of putting this together today. And of course, the AHP NJ board and Lindsay Britt for making this look so easy. Thank you all for all that help. There's a survey at the end of the session, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Lindsay. And please stick
There's a
around.
quick survey. So once the webinar ends, that will pop up on your screen. So please stay on to take that.
Yeah, it's super important that you take that, because we are looking at those results and we are using it to inform other sessions and improve the delivery of our sessions. And with that, Ed, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Hello, can you hear me, Mark?
Yes.
Thank you. And I apologize. Ed Schmier, I'm the president of this wonderful organization. And I had audio problems at the beginning. I couldn't welcome you, but I could say goodbye on behalf of our organization. I'd like to also thank our friends from HUD for joining us. It was very helpful to have you with us and to be introduced to the 79 participants in this webinar. And we appreciate the opportunity to present these. Hopefully you view these as kind of nuts and bolts opportunities to hear questions that you all as administrative agents and deliverers of affordable housing here in New Jersey may have, and we'll continue to present these. I'm also going to nominate Mark Leckington for a position on the New Jersey TV network. I think he'd be a great host. We're going to get rid of some of those characters, and Mark is going to move into that slot. But on behalf of the affordable housing professionals of New Jersey, we'd like to thank you again for attending our webinar. And I thank also our programming committee, and hopefully we'll be continuing to present these throughout the health emergency and beyond. So thank you very much for joining us, and have a good day.